Welcome, everyone. Today, we're examining the sources you shared on a true global behemoth, Starbucks.
That's right. And our goal here is to really chart the company's entire course,
From that single, humble storefront in Seattle.
all the way to becoming the world's largest coffee house chain. We're hoping to give you the shortcut to being really well informed on a business that has, defined so much of modern coffee culture.
And the material we have to work with is incredibly thorough.
It is. It takes us from their founding in 1971 through massive product shifts right up to some major strategic moves and controversies that were happening as recently as early 2025.
So it's not just about the financial success. It also gets into the complexity and the challenges.
Absolutely. The objective is to synthesize all these facts, really focusing on how a niche retailer of coffee beans became this global giant with, over 40,000 locations.
So we're going to analyze that evolution piece by piece. We'll look at the key product innovations.
Map out the international expansion, which had some spectacular failures along with the successes.
And we have to provide an impartial, detailed review of the major criticisms they've faced. Things like labor conflicts, ethical sourcing, all of it.
This is really the story of how they created that idea of the third place and, how they might be moving away from it now.
So let's get into it. Let's start at the beginning, with three guys and a pile of coffee beans in the 1970s.
The origins are, I think, really foundational to understanding where the brand's early credibility came from.
Okay, so when and where?
It was established on March 30, 1971 in Seattle, Washington.
And the founders were Jerry Baldwin, Zev Siegel, and Gordon Bowker.
Right, three friends, and they were academics. They weren't coming from a business background.
And they were inspired by someone else, right?
Very much so. A coffee roasting entrepreneur named Alfred Peet, the founder of Peet's Coffee and Tea.
That inspiration is so critical because it tells us what Starbucks wasn't at the start.
Exactly. It was not an espresso bar.
For its entire first decade, it was just a retailer. High-quality, whole coffee beans and brewing equipment. That was the whole business model.
The idea of a prepared beverage just wasn't there. They started very small. Their first store was at 2000 Western Avenue.
From 71 to 76, before they moved to the more famous location at 1912 Pike Place.
And that initial focus on the quality of the raw material of the bean itself is something that's often forgotten today.
Even the name has a certain weight to it.
It does. They considered Starbo, which was a local mining town,
But they landed on Starbuck.
from Moby Dick, the name of the chief mate.
So it evokes this idea of seafaring, of global trade.
Right. And of course, coffee importation. Boker later said the book itself wasn't a direct influence, but the name just felt right. It anchored them in that Pacific Northwest maritime culture.
And operationally, they weren't even roasting their own beans at first.
No, not at all. For the first couple of years, until 1973, they bought their green coffee beans directly from Peet's.
From their inspiration, Alfred Peet.
It was a close relationship. In fact, Alfred Peet himself trained their new roastmaster, a man named Jim Reynolds.
And that's a huge step. Bringing roasting in-house give them full control over quality.
It was a quiet but necessary move towards self-determination. So this whole period, the 70s, was about building a reputation for quality.
But a reputation based on a product, not an experience.
Precisely. The transformation into the coffeehouse chain we know today, that really begins in the 1980s.
And the person who drives that change is, of course, Howard Schultz.
Right. But the shift starts even before he takes over. In 1984, the original owners, led by Jerry Baldwin, actually purchased Peet's Coffee.
That's an interesting move, buying the company that inspired them.
It is. And by 1986, with Schultz now on board as the director of marketing, they have 6 stores in Seattle.
And they start to tentatively, experiment with selling prepared espresso.
Which was a huge departure from that original bean-only philosophy. It created tension.
So the decisive moment comes in 1987.
It does. The original founders, who are still very much focused on that traditional coffee model, they sell the chain.
To Howard Schultz.
To Schultz. He had traveled to Italy, and he'd just fallen in love with the social, vibrant culture of the espresso bars there.
So he immediately rebrands his own coffee outlets, which are called Il Giornale,
and turns them into Starbucks. And he completely shifts the strategic focus.
The goal isn't to sell beans anymore.
No. The goal is to sell the Italian espresso bar experience, the third place.
And he backs that pivot with immediate, really aggressive expansion.
That same year, 1987, they make their first big moves outside of Seattle.
Where do they go?
Vancouver, British Columbia, and Chicago, Illinois.
So right away, it's an international, multinational vision.
Absolutely. It was a clear statement of intent, and the growth was just explosive.
The source material shows that by 1989, just 2 years after Schultz took control,
They had 46 stores, all across the Pacific Northwest and the Midwest.
and the operational scale had to match that retail growth.
They were roasting over 2 million pounds of coffee annually. That's about 907,000 kilograms.
That kind of exponential growth requires a lot of capital.
A huge amount, which brings us directly to the financial markets and Wall Street.
Right, the IPO.
Yeah.
In June of 1992, Starbucks, trading as SBUX, goes public.
And that's the moment it really solidifies its place as a major American retail success story.
The numbers really show that velocity. At the time of the IPO, they had 140 outlets,
A huge jump from 46 just 3 years earlier,
and their revenue had hit $73.5 million.
which is just a massive leap from the 1.3 million they had in 1987.
And that IPO wasn't just about validation, was it? It was about fuel.
It was pure rocket fuel. The company's market value hit $271 million.
They sold a 12% portion, which raised $25 million.
And the key here is that the money wasn't for consolidation, it was for acceleration. The sources are very clear that those funds were immediately earmarked to double the store count over the next 2 years.
So the IPO was a financial ignition switch for their global scale.
Without a doubt. So this first section shows us two distinct phases. The 70s, where quality was everything.
And then the post-87 phase, where Schultz leveraged that quality, married it to the third-place social concept, and then used Wall Street to scale it at an unprecedented rate.
A stunning transformation.
Okay, so that covers how they conquered physical space. Let's move on and look at how they conquered the menu and their own operational complexity.
Well, to maintain that kind of growth, they needed to keep expanding their product line. They knew they couldn't just rely on espresso and drip coffee forever.
Especially as they moved into new, warmer climates and wanted to appeal to people year-round.
Exactly. So their strategy became very dependent on acquisition to quickly integrate successful concepts from other companies.
And there is no better example of this than the story of the Frappuccino.
It's maybe the single most important product in the company's history, and as you said, they didn't invent it.
No, in 1994, Starbucks acquired a company called The Coffee Connection.
And that deal gave them the full rights to use, market, and sell the Frappuccino beverage.
They introduced it under the Starbucks name in 1995, and it just fundamentally changed the company.
It really did. It wasn't just coffee anymore. It was a dessert. It was a treat. It opened them up to a whole new demographic.
Younger customers, people who didn't like the taste of strong coffee.
Right. And the financial impact was staggering. The sources confirmed that by 2012, that single product line was generating over $2 billion in annual sales.
It's the product that transformed Starbucks from a specialty coffee shop into a mass-market beverage brand.
That's a great way to put it. It signaled that they were about customizable, cold, sugary convenience just as much as they were about the perfect espresso.
And the acquisitions kept coming.
They bought Pasqua Coffee in 1999. Then in 2003, a bigger deal. Seattle's Best Coffee and Torrefazione Italia for $72 million.
And the key part of that deal wasn't the retail stores. It was the wholesale business of Seattle's Best.
Exactly. That allowed them to compete in grocery stores and in markets where the premium Starbucks brand maybe didn't fit.
They even got into manufacturing equipment.
Right. In 2008, they acquired the Coffee Equipment Company, which made the high-end Clover brewing system.
It shows a desire to control every single aspect of the coffee experience, from the bean to the machine that brews it.
Their move into the tea market was maybe a bit less successul.
They acquired Tazo back in 1999, which was a solid brand.
But the big bet was on Tevena. They bought it in 2012 for a massive $620 million.
And the plan was to create a tea version of the third place.
A huge, ambitious plan. They did roll out Tevena teas into Starbucks stores in 2015, which was successful.
But the standalone retail strategy just failed.
It did. The sources confirm a pretty swift retreat. They sold the Tazo brand to Unilever in 2017 for $384 million.
And the Tevena retail brand itself was completely shut down in early 2018.
It's a good reminder that even a massive capital investment doesn't guarantee a strategic fit.
And we should also touch on something that seems simple but is a huge part of their brand. The names for everything. The cup sizes.
It's a key part of the identity. They intentionally moved away from small, medium, large.
So we have the short, which is 8 ounces for hot drinks only.
Then the tall at 12 ounces, the grande at 16.
Which means large in Italian.
And the venti, meaning 20, which is 20 ounces for a hot drink, but a much larger 26 ounces for an iced one.
It's intentionally complex. It creates this proprietary language that you have to learn to be an insider.
Absolutely strategic.
Actually,
And then you have the Trenta.
the 30-ounce behemoth.
Italian for 30, yes. And that's only for certain cold drinks, like iced tea and cold brew.
Beyond the consistent branding, they're always trying to innovate. And sometimes those innovations get a little strange.
Case in point, the Oleato experiment.
The olive oil coffee.
Exactly. A line of drinks infused with extra virgin olive oil introduced in February 2023.
The origin story here is fascinating. It came from Howard Schultz himself.
It did. It was his personal habit, picked up on a trip to Sicily. He was touting it as one of the biggest launches in decades.
They launched it in Italy, then Southern California, with huge plans for a global rollout.
But the sources suggest it was a strategic failure tied to a very basic consumer expectation.
Digestive issue.
Right. CNN and other outlets reported that numerous customers experienced digestive distress after drinking it.
That's not great publicity.
No. And it created a lot of operational complexity for the baristas. So despite all the hype from the top,
It was permanently discontinued in November of 2024.
it shows that even the most powerful CEO can't force a product on consumers if it doesn't work for them on a very fundamental level.
And that failure might be connected to a more recent focus on efficiency and simplification.
A huge shift. In February 2025, as part of the new CEO strategy, the company cut 30% of its menu.
It's a massive cut.
It's a clear admission that decades of innovation had created a slow, complex operation. They cut unpopular, difficult-to-make items.
Things like certain frappuccinos, the Royal English Breakfast Latte.
White hot chocolate. The goal was purely to streamline the process and reduce costs. It's a real pivot away from that history of endless product options.
And this complexity also extends to things like milk choices, where they've really led the industry.
They have. They started offering soy milk way back in 1997.
And then in 2007, they made that huge switch, making 2% milk the standard instead of whole milk.
A big change. And since then, the non-dairy options just exploded. Coconut in 2015, almond in 2016, and then oat milk went national in 2020.
And they often tied this shift to their sustainability goals.
Yes, CEO Kevin Johnson said in 2020 that moving to milk substitutes was a key part of reducing their environmental footprint,
But for years, there was this contradiction. They had an upcharge for non-dairy milk.
which drew a lot of protests from environmental groups and vegans. They argued that the pricing went directly against the company's stated goals.
That tension was finally resolved pretty recently.
It was. The sources show that the upcharge for non-dairy milk was finally ended in November 2024. A highly publicized move to align their pricing with their environmental message.
And their broader environmental targets are extremely ambitious,
Very. In 2020, they announced a commitment to become resource positive.
which means a 50% reduction in carbon emissions, waste, and water impact by 2030.
And they have taken concrete steps. They phased out plastic straws by January 2020.
And they're planning to phase out disposable cups entirely in South Korea by 2025.
It shows a recognition that you need a localized approach to waste reduction.
So this whole section shows a company in constant motion. Acquisitions, high-risk product bets, and policy shifts driven by both operational needs and public pressure.
Precisely. They conquered the menu through constant churn, but now they're trying to conquer the complexity that came with it.
So if that's how they manage the menu, how do they manage to translate that complex U.S.-centric model into a global footprint?
Well, their global expansion is a story of really high highs and some very, very public lows.
The initial steps seem promising. They moved into Asia and Europe pretty quickly.
Right. They entered Japan in 1996 and the United Kingdom in 1998.
And in the UK, they used acquisition as a shortcut. They bought the 56-store Seattle Coffee Company and just rebranded them.
A way to leapfrog the local competition. But the turbulence they hit in other markets are really crucial case studies.
Like the closure of their store in Beijing's Forbidden City in 2007.
A perfect example. It closed after years of public opposition. The sentiment was that this American chain was, and I'm quoting, trampling on Chinese culture by being in such a sensitive historical site.
And their problems in the Middle East and Australia were even more severe financially.
They closed all 6 of their locations in Israel in 2003. They just couldn't compete with the entrenched local coffee culture.
And Australia was a colossal failure.
It was. They closed 61 of their 85 stores there in 2008. They later admitted they just failed to truly understand Australia's cafe culture, which is already very sophisticated.
So they sold off the rest of their stores there in 2014. These failures really show that the third-place model isn't universally portable.
Not at all. But despite those setbacks, the sheer scale of their global presence today is just staggering.
The 2025 data from the sources says they operate 40,990 locations.
In 87 countries, making it, by far, the world's largest coffeehouse chain.
And that footprint is heavily concentrated in 2 markets.
Overwhelmingly. As of 2023, the United States and China together account for 61% of all global locations. China, especially, is seen as the key battleground for future growth.
We also have to mention their response to major geopolitical events.
Like the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, Starbucks closed all of its 130 licensed stores in Russia.
And then exited the market completely.
Yes, and those locations were quickly rebranded by the new owners as Stars Coffee.
Which shows how strong the consumer demand is for that kind of experience, even without the original brand.
And the store concept itself, the physical design, has also had to evolve.
By 2014, they realized that one-size-fits-all design just wasn't working.
Right. They shifted to focusing on locally relevant design for each store, trying to blend in rather than just stamping their template everywhere.
And they took that idea to an extreme with the stealth Starbucks experiment.
Especially in Seattle. These were debranded locations, like one called Roy Street Coffee and Tea.
They were designed to look and feel like independent local coffee houses.
Howard Schultz called them a laboratory. They tested everything from serving wine and beer to hosting live music.
But they also drew criticism for local washing.
That's the term, yes. A big corporation trying to masquerade as a small local business to capture a different market segment.
The need for operational change became really critical after the COVID-19 pandemic.
A massive pivot. In June 2020, they announced the closure of 400 stores in the U.S. and Canada.
And this wasn't just about cutting costs. It was a strategic shift.
A huge one. A shift toward what they called convenience-led formats.
So focusing on drive-through, curbside pickup, and mobile orders.
It was a monumental change, really moving away from the third-place model. They plan to open 300 new stores centered almost entirely on carryout. Speed over socializing.
At the same time, they did make some design efforts toward inclusion.
They did. In February 2024, they unveiled a new store design focused on improving accessibility.
But then, accompanying that pivot to efficiency, came the formal end of a key cultural policy.
The open door policy. In January 2025, the company reversed it. Now, you have to make a purchase to use the restrooms or seating areas.
A clear prioritization of paying customers over the old community model.
And this all ties into the massive leadership churn the company has seen recently.
After Schultz's various stints, we had Kevin Johnson as CEO, who was then succeeded by Laxman Narasimhan in March 2023.
And Narasimhan's style was very immersive. He famously trained as a barista, pledged to work a shift every month.
But his time as CEO was incredibly brief.
It was. It suggests a lot of anxiety at the board level. In August 2024, he was out.
And replaced immediately by Brian Niccol, the former CEO of Chipotle.
Niccol took over in September 2024 with a huge compensation package, a $1.6 million salary and a $10 million starting bonus.
And his background is key, right? He's known as an operational efficiency expert.
Exactly. His arrival signaled that the board was prioritizing streamlining and cost control above all else.
His back to Starbucks strategy confirmed that. It included the massive menu simplification.
And the reversal of the open door policy. It's a clear move away from idealism toward operational profit.
And that push for efficiency also hit the corporate office.
It did. In July 2025, corporate employees were told to return to the office 4 days a week. And if they didn't want to, they were offered a voluntary exit package.
So it's clear the path to 40,000 stores isn't just about successful products. It's about adapting strategy, even if it means abandoning some of your core cultural ideas.
Which brings us to the immense pressure they face trying to align their stated social values with the realities of their supply chain and their workforce.
Starbucks has spent decades building an image of being an ethical sourcer, mostly through its CAFE practices program.
Right, which stands for Coffee and Farmer Equity. It was developed with Conservation International, and it's quite comprehensive. It uses 249 different indicators to rate suppliers.
And these aren't just basic legal requirements. The social accountability metrics are really strict.
They are. For example, there's a zero-tolerance indicator that workers have to be paid at least minimum wage, and it has to be delivered by check cash, or direct deposit for transparency.
And it prohibits employing children under 14 and requires workplaces to be free of harassment.
Right, and it covers things like safe housing, pesticide exposure, access to protective gear. It's very detailed.
And they got 90% of their coffee purchases certified through this system, or similar ones. But it's faced criticism.
A lot of criticism, mostly centered on the idea that this is a way to greenwash their image, that they're controlling the narrative instead of submitting to independent external oversight.
And those criticisms gained real traction. The source material points to a 2019 report from Brazil.
A very concerning one. Brazilian labor inspectors found proof of child slave labor practices in the supply chain of producers who were CAFE certified.
That is a stark contradiction. It shows just how hard it is to maintain perfect oversight in a global supply chain that massive.
It really is. And their relationship with external certifications has become strained. They used to support fair trade.
But in 2022, they made a big decision to stop certifying their coffee as fair trade.
Instead, they chose to rely solely on their own internal CAFE investigations. Advocates saw that as a step backward from accountability.
This tension between their public image and their actual practices is really magnified when we look at the unionization efforts. This has become a defining struggle for the company.
It has. We need to be very impartial here and just present the facts and the allegations from both sides.
So it all started in Buffalo, New York in August 2021.
Workers there formed an organizing committee, Starbucks Workers United, or SBWU, affiliated with the National Union, Workers United.
And in December 2021, the Elmwood Avenue store in Buffalo became the first company-owned U.S. store to successfully unionize.
And the company's response was, according to the workers, very aggressive. The union alleged that Starbucks deployed a lot of anti-union tactics.
This included flying in high-ranking managers to Buffalo, holding mandatory captive audience meetings,
and temporarily closing stores for renovations right after organizing efforts began. They also hired the law firm Littler Mendelson, which is well known for opposing union formation.
And the conflict escalated to allegations of retaliation. In February 2022, Starbucks fired 7 workers in Memphis who were leading the effort there.
The Memphis 7, they became known as. And over the next few months, the sources indicate that more than 85 organizing workers across the country were terminated.
This led to the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, getting involved.
Heavily involved. In August 2022, the NLRB accused Starbucks of illegally discriminating against union workers by denying them the same raises and benefits that non-union workers got.
Then, in November 2023, Starbucks closed the very first unionized store in Seattle.
They officially cited safety concerns, but the union strongly disputed that reason.
And the struggle continued at the bargaining table. As of 2023, not a single contract had been successfully negotiated.
No. Starbucks alleged the union was delaying bargaining and illegally broadcasting sessions. They filed over 20 unfair labor practice charges.
But the NLRB weighed in definitively. In March 2023, they ruled against Starbucks.
A critical ruling. The board found no merit in the company's complaints and ruled that it was Starbucks who had refused to bargain in good faith and had illegally withheld raises.
The ruling even included a mandate that then CEO Howard Schultz had to read a notice about it.
Union members responded with more visible strikes. There was the 2022 Red Cup Day strike.
And in November 2025, a bigger action called the Red Cup Riot Walkout.
That involved about 1,000 baristas at over 65 locations walking out on one of the busiest days of the year.
And these disputes aren't just about pay. In June 2023, workers walked out to protest what they saw as limits on displaying LGBT pride decorations.
So it's about workplace culture and social identity, too.
Shifting to racial and political controversies, the company has a long history here. We should review this with appropriate sympathy for those who are harmed.
Yes. The record goes back to a 1994 settlement over employees dismissed due to race, age, and sex. There were specific allegations of a supervisor using derogatory language.
And in 2009, they settled a lawsuit with an African-American engineer who sued over racist bullying in the workplace.
The most famous incident, though, was in Philadelphia in 2018.
The viral video that showed the arrests of 2 black men in a store. They were waiting for a friend and hadn't made a purchase, and they were arrested for trespassing.
The incident caused immense, widespread public outrage.
The company's response was very swift. The CEO publicly apologized. They declined to press charges.
And, crucially, they closed about 8,000 of their stores for an entire afternoon to conduct mandatory racial bias training for 175,000 employees. A huge, costly action showing the intense pressure they were under.
Finally, we have to look at the political boycott in late 2023 during the Gaza war.
This started not with a corporate statement, but with the company suing its own union, SBWU.
The union had posted solidarity with Palestine on social media.
And Starbucks sued for trademark infringement, arguing the union's use of its name and logo in a charged political stance was harming its reputation.
The union then alleged that Starbucks was defaming it by implying the union supported violence.
And this legal fight immediately spilled over into consumer boycotts, especially in the Middle East. The CEO tried to clarify the company's neutral stance, writing, "We stand for humanity."
It just perfectly illustrates the tightrope these multinational corporations have to walk.
The sources really paint a picture of a company defined by scale and tension. They master convenience, but that scale creates immense friction everywhere.
In the supply chain, with their labor force, and in the polarized social environment they have to operate in.
So to summarize the key points from all this material, we've charted the dramatic, relentless scaling of this company. It now operates over 40,000 locations in 87 countries.
And is dominated by its two core markets, the U.S. and China. We also analyzed its product strategy, using acquisition to create billion-dollar hits like the Frappuccino.
While also taking high-profile risks, like the very costly failure of Oleato.
And crucially, we've detailed that sharp strategic pivot under the new leadership of Brian Niccol.
A strategy that explicitly prioritizes efficiency. We see it in the 30% menu cut and the reversal of the open-door policy.
It's a clear move away from that third-place idealism and toward operational control and maximizing revenue.
And we examine the complex challenges that come with operating a massive brand under such intense public scrutiny.
From the ongoing high-stakes unionization efforts and the legal battles with SBWU,
to the institutional responses needed for past racial bias incidents and current political boycotts.
the continuous tension that defines the company is just so clear. Starbucks has mastered the art of convenience and scale.
But its corporate history shows this constant, difficult struggle, a struggle to align its publicly stated social values with the relentless financial pressures of growth and profitability that an empire of this size requires.
It really is an incredible transformation. From three partners selling roasted beans in Seattle to a global powerhouse that dictates coffee trends and workplace policy around the world.
So, considering the company's dramatic recent shift towards efficiency, simplifying the menu, mandating a return to the office, restricting access, what might that concept of the third place, that home away from home, what might that look like 5 years from now?
And maybe more fundamentally, can a single global brand truly serve all of its vastly different markets and all of its complex internal groups simultaneously, especially while prioritizing profit above all else? That is something to think about. Thanks for listening.